work with families, because I suppose there's a line of argument that says if you could solve the problem at family level, you wouldn't actually need either social services or you to intervene.
Our first port of call is to do a home visit and find out what condition the child is living in and identify if there might be a carer in the child's life who could be strengthened to parent that child. And to give you an example, recently we found some children under the age of 11, 3 children with 2 drug-addicted parents. And we identified the grandmother as someone who could be helped by our staff to take care of the children. And we've managed to push for both parents to go to rehab.
Right.
So we will try that. But the truth is that, you know, we have some 800 children with us on Christmas Day.
Yeah. You find that if you can keep the child in their own home and give them support there, it turns out better in the end than taking them out of it.
It's a much better model. And, you know, if you look at the Kids Company model, our centre is open 6 days a week. We have 2 emergency houses. Children can come into our centre anytime they want to, for anything they want. We have a doctor, a nurse, 9 teachers. If you need to fill in a form, if you need a pair of socks, if you've got a tooth abscess, whatever it is, you can just walk in.
One-stop shop.
And we'll help you immediately.
Yes.
It's a much more effective use of resource than a social worker having to make an appointment to visit the house and have 2 security men with her so that she doesn't get attacked on the estate. You know, the models under which we're operating are really flawed. And the centre can act as a kind of parenting capacity to strengthen the biological parent or to supplement it.
So substitute family, really.
Absolutely.
How many of the children you deal with are actually registered on with a mainstream school and go most days?
The children who come to our street level centres arrive, sort of some 60% of them arrive out of education. So we're having to try and find educational provisions for them and get them back in.
They're not even on anyone's register?
You know, there's a word called ghosting.
Yes.
And basically what ghosting means is you get rid of a child, but you don't show it on any paper anywhere, you know. And I understand, you know, quite frankly, if I was a teacher with 30 children in a class and I had 2 or 3 of these completely dysregulated, aggressive, challenging kids, I think I would really struggle because what we also know from brain research is that these children can alter the ability of other children to calm down by virtue of just, you know, manipulating the energy field.
That's right. I mean, that was my own experience when I was teaching. That if 2 children were away, the other 28 would be a completely different social group. But that same argument is there. I mean, equally, if you understand why some teachers find that they can't cope with them, you also have some sympathy with perhaps elderly people or law-abiding families who just find their presence in their neighbourhood too much to bear.
Do you know what? I agree that the presence of very disturbed children is very challenging. Where I differ with the current debate is that you can solve this problem immediately by putting an adult next to that child who can act as an attachment figure. So I would say understaffing in classrooms is much more of a challenge and a problem than the disturbed child. I would put it the other way around.
But with proper support, most of your children should be able to cope with mainstream school?
Absolutely. And you know, also in one primary school at the moment, we're piloting a project where we're taking the most challenging and disturbed children and giving them 20-minute exercise breaks. So, and in that way, we're basically helping them regulate their energy functioning, and the early results are really, really good.
So let's go on to that. So you work with 33 schools at the moment who've approached you and, if you like, partly buying your services, and then you top it up with a lot of your own money. So when you go to school, what do you add to what's already there on the premises?
What we do when we go into a school is that we do a full audit of need. So we'll speak to the dinner ladies, the premises officer, the teachers. We'll have a good sense of what the difficulties are in that school. And then we create therapy rooms which are fully equipped with toys and art materials. We go to assembly and speak to the children and allow the children to self-refer to our services. And the services that are being offered in each school is that there's a fully qualified psychotherapist on the premises for at least 3 days a week.
Right.
And that person is the team leader. Around the team leader, we'll build up a team of 20 workers who are social workers, trainee psychotherapists, artists, musicians, alternative health workers. So we will have an unbelievable resource base of some 20 workers who are brought into the school. And then the kids self-refer, and they can go to an art club, or they can go to one-to-one therapy, or they can go to stop bullying, or we run leadership programs where year 5s are providing clubs for year 2s, and we train year 5s in leadership. So it's a very creative, emotional well-being program. But
presumably the school has to be prepared for this almost, because it's quite a change to what they do.
The negative behaviour of the children goes down. So teachers are a bit relieved that they've got the support that they've always wanted. Because what I've seen is teachers want the very best for the children, but they don't have the resource.
Yeah.
So when a resource comes in and does the bit that they are unable to do at the time, you know, they feel strengthened.
What about those that aren't on anyone's register? Once they've turned up with you, to some extent society knows about them, and you can't then ghost them, you can't pretend that they're at school when they're not. Where do they end up being educated?
We've got some of the schools that we work with therapeutically have deals with us where, for example, if we find a child on the street who hasn't been in education, those schools will take them for us. And we chase local education authorities to try and get kids back into the system. The difficulty is the 16 pluses, because those who are of school leaving age arrive, but they can't read and write, and they can't access college because they're emotionally and behaviourally so immature still. And that's why we ended up creating our urban academy, where teachers, therapists and alternative health practitioners work together with the students. So the timetable is done that the child can have one massage, can go to a lesson, and can have their housing issue addressed, and can have psychotherapy.
And is that for those over 16? Is that for those under 16 as well?
For our under 16s, in our urban academy, there's a pupil referral unit.
Right. Is that funded by the local authorities?
Some local authorities are buying places there, and we have an 85% reintegration rate back into mainstream.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really much higher than is normally the case.
It is, because it's 34 normally.
Yeah. Looking slightly from the outside, I think there's been an attempt to bring more bodies, more adults into the school. There are mentors, there are more classroom assistants to deal with children. So it worries me a little bit that some schools have still not got this right. Is it a case of us not having sufficient of these extra adults in school to work with children? Or have we not actually targeted, again, the right set of skills that some children need?
I think the right set of skills and the thinking, the lack of right kind of thinking is the point. For example, for the child who is physiologically dysregulated and disorganized, behavior modification isn't working, because what they need is someone to bring down their chemical arousal levels through an attachment relationship. But people don't understand why one method works with one child and why another doesn't, because there isn't a sophisticated enough thinking amongst the workforce because of the way they're being trained. Now, all the literature and the science of this is available in neuropsychiatry.
And it's new research. This is a new area, isn't it?
Very new area of research, but very robust area of research. But all the knowledge is still in clinics, and it's not filtering down to the workforce. So the workforce is not benefiting from the science, and it's still stuck in a kind of pseudo-Christian morality way of handling very disturbed children.
It's interesting that you say, despite all your children's experiences, that schools are still an institution where this support should happen. And I think that's important, because with moving to extended day and extended services, I mean, you've not given up, if you like, have you, on schools as institutions being potentially part of the solution?
But you know, the interesting thing is that actually the most competent people in the schools might be the magical dinner lady.
Yes.
But can
got the relationship
someone
with the child.
explain why this particular dinner lady happens to be so brilliant with the most disturbed children? That is the intellectual property that needs to be made visible. We need to dare to say that actually attachment, love, and compassion might be better tools of control than punishment and sanctions.
That leads us into something I did want to raise with you. I suppose some of the children who you're talking about might be in gangs because it might be part of the security that they lack elsewhere in their life.
If you're not naturally a violent child, you better join a gang and have the protection of other children and create the myth of danger and lethalness and take pictures with firearms and that kind of thing. The whole point of all this is that it's two sets of children wanting safety, but because they believe adults are incapable of providing safety for them, they've managed a system that perversely, through violence, ensures safety. And that is the issue. So we've got to, as a society, take responsibility for reducing violence.
It's interesting, you said you raised £40 million for Kids Company so far, and I know that you still got money to raise. There's real threats over the organisation about funding for next year. You know, should you be mainstream? Should the state, the local authorities, should they be doing what you're doing, or is part of the attraction of your organisation for kids is that you're not the state, you're not the system?
The state is still thinking about outcomes and solutions that can be captured by computers. Until we put affection and love at the centre of our interventions, we're not going to reach these children whose fundamental crisis is emotional. That's number one. In terms of whether we should be within the statutory sector or independent, we could be and should be within the statutory sector, provided the standard isn't going to get compromised. And the beauty of a Kids Company agency at street level is that when a statutory organisation doesn't honour its care to a vulnerable child, we can take that statutory agency to judicial review on behalf of that child. If I was employed by the local authority, I'd be threatened with withdrawal of
funding. And you wouldn't
funding.
want to trade that even for statutory funding, which would make you financially more secure?
I will never trade anything that is going to compromise the quality of the service.
And I think, finally, do you remain an optimist about the state of our country, about this generation of children who will eventually become the generation of adults?
I'm hugely optimistic because 40 million that I've raised is a measure of the compassion and the kindness of complete strangers. So that's a measure of the compassion that's out there in the general public. I think my job is to strengthen that kind of thinking by changing the debate in the media and by making the information available to the public so that they understand the duty left to the adults of this country is one of child protection, not one of locking up children.
Camilla, thank you for what you do and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.